Knowing oneself. Well, I think that goes to lots of learning to be present in a moment and to
Yeah.
listen to more, kind of I call it soul speak. It's always that intuition, that gut feeling. And when you follow that, usually you're on the right path compared to making choices based off of what you think family members or society or culture will tell you.
Yeah.
Because most people would think I'm nuts for learning to farm, finding a ranch, getting horses, and starting to be a single female woman in ag. So
So why do you say that? Have people given you that kind of blowback?
people don't quite get it. They don't know that it's like, well, why would you give up a city life? And you did so much when you worked in entertainment and music and fashion, and that's just, you had a dream life that everybody wanted. I'm like, yeah, and I was dying in it. I hated it because I got into it because that's what others kind of led me to believe that I should be in. When originally, when I was, a teenager doing 4-H, being on my grandmother's farm, I was happy doing farm work and working with horses and assisting with livestock. And I've been making the joke lately. I'm like, I've just come full circle because I stopped listening to others and I started listening to myself.
When did that start? What was the turning point for you?
So it's been an evolution over a period of years. It started when I was 33, living in Los Angeles, and there was just one day I'm like, I can't live here anymore. And 3 days later, I'd come up to a conference, a tech conference here in Seattle, and it was September, so it was still nice. It wasn't the blackness, but it was green, and there was water, and the air was clean, and I was like, what is this? And compared to Los Angeles, which is just very hot and very, very busy, I'm like, I think I'm going to give this a try. So I went home and I was at the end of my lease of my apartment and I literally packed and moved up here on a whim and moved to Woodinville and just kind of learned to explore the outdoors and nature, went back to California because of the work I did. But then it was because if you read my blog, I talk about my love and the evolution of food and understanding food and nutrition, like ad nauseum. But when I was in California, I was just telling Victoria, who I work with on the horses, that writing about food and learning a lot about health and wellness, because that's just kind of ingrained in Los Angeles, everything on the West Coast. But I was like, there's something wrong here. Like, why are people kind of like starving themselves and depriving themselves? So I'm like, I want to learn more about food and nutrition. I started volunteering and apprenticing on various ranches in Northern California. And, the first thing I learned was how to castrate a goat. Hey, look, I would go wherever someone would take me. And then it moved into raising and butchering hogs, which love that. And just, like when I started like my exploration of food, I'm like, oh, I'm going to learn how, food, what our bodies really need to be healthy. And that just kind of segued into learning to raise livestock and soil health and like literally the beginning of it. I'm like, this isn't exactly what I thought, but that's where it started. So over 3 years, a lot of apprenticing, a lot of learning, and it was across the board. Some of it was organic, some of it was more regenerative, some of it was just more, traditional, commercial style farming. But I didn't go in with any biases or preconceived notions. I just wanted to learn from those that would share with me. And that just, I think I've talked before, it's like every time you learn something about a piece of production, you change your mind or you expand your view because you're like, there really is no one way to do this correctly. Some people are no-till, some people are till, some people are organic, some people are not. But I think there's a case for everything, and it's dependent on a variety of factors. Location, size of the ranch, the ability of the ranch owner even. One of the places that I spent the longest time learning, and I learned the most, like they were both 65. And they had 50 animals on 8, and they had 8 acres. And, like I said, that's where I learned to castrate goats. That's where I learned about raising hogs. Their orchard was falling apart. And then that's where I went into learning about soil health so that I could help bring back their trees, which we did it. But it took years. It wasn't something that was overnight. And I fell in love with learning about it. And, at the time I was still doing my main business for marketing, and I was doing, the music, the corporate, everything that came our way. And it was about 2 years ago. I'm like, I can't work for people that are in other industries other than food, agriculture, and certain aspects of health, because it just doesn't align to what I believe in and what I understand. So we let go of 60% of our business. I mean, you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. I just said, forget it. I don't want it. And we started over because we let go of all the money, but it wasn't about that. And I didn't regret it. That was, again, like being more true to myself, because like I said, it was just stop listening to others about what you should have or who you should have as clients or anything else. I was like, well, I'm going to start with learning what I value, what's important to me. And it was this love affair that came into learning how our food is grown and raised. And then like just this life that I had been taken away from when I was 8, because my mother wanted to be in a city. So, that's where it came to. So I love what I do. I love my work. I love my skills. I just now do it for people that no matter how they do it, I do my best to understand their businesses, their needs, their challenges, and provide value to help them create solutions that work for them in the ways that they do things.
So you're saying that your journey didn't start out being aimed toward farming. At first, it was just about health.
Health, like nutrition of food. I was just, I was vegan for 8 years, and I pretty much juiced half my meals. I was basically starving myself. Like, I've written about this very candidly, because in Los Angeles, it's all about being rich, pretty, and skinny. So I lived off about 1,600 calories, half of which were liquid, and I ate a raw diet. I was miserable, and I was actually very sick. So when I started learning about like how meat is produced, and when you can do it in a way that is ethical and very not detrimental to the animals, because that's really that's what they, that's what's promoted by PETA and certain groups, and it's even, we won't go there quite yet if you want to, but the day I ate goat and pork that we had raised, I was like, can I just have more and put some peas in it? And I literally ate goat meat and pork and peas for 6 weeks straight. But I felt I was like coherent, and I wasn't hungry. And I just, it was, I started with needing to understand what my body needed to be better and at its best. And that it just was something that just evolved. It wasn't a target. And it just, when I realized it, I was telling you, I make a joke now where I'm like, wow, let's see. Well, when I was young and on my grandparents' farm, all I wanted to do was ride horses, write stories, and take pictures, because they had me in 4-H doing like photography and stuff. And I'm like, look at where I ended up. And I only took 20-something years to get back there. So it was just kind of this evolution. And, I love what I've learned from other experiences in the past. But at this point, to me, life isn't worth not doing something you love and aligned to your values.
Who's our friend back here, by the way? She looks like she's trying to join.
This is Tulsa. And she's kind of a mascot. She's an old barrel racing horse. And she's very lively.
I can tell she wants to be part of the conversation here, too.
And I think this is the first horse on the podcast and the video, so I think you're right. I think I got something original going on here.
Yeah, I think so. I think if she could talk, she would probably have quite a bit to add here.
Yeah, she would tell you the story of how she hated me at first, and now we are best friends.
That's awesome.
We had to grow on each other.
Hi, Tulsa. Hi. So you're saying, you were looking for health. It was about health that led you to farming. And right away, the first thing you're talking about to me is raising animals and meat. Yet a lot of people, and especially in this like West Coast urban healthy culture, like we're told, well, that's not really healthy. Like meat isn't healthy. All this kind of stuff isn't really what you need to be your best. But that was where you ended up right away digging into in your search for better health.
Yeah, and I think and that's another thing a lot of people don't understand is a lot, the history, like there are genetic factors and what your body needs to be its best. That's one of the things I learned in studying health and nutrition science in the coursework that I did at some of the universities in Northern California. So I actually went back to school to get science-based understanding of this stuff, not just what you read from popular influencers or doctors that have kind of taken this the more of the, I don't know how you exactly call it, because like I said, there's no one right thing, but there's a certain thing that I guess you want to call it like wellness fads that are so overblown. The trendy stuff that is so overblown that it completely it covers up what the truth is, and and the thing is, food and health aren't complicated. We've made it complicated, and that's what I actually wrote my book about food on, and it's a little book called Love Food, Love Yourself, and it was what I've learned in the 3 years from going to school, from doing this firsthand. It's not about meat isn't bad for you. Bread isn't bad for you. Do you know how awesome gluten is? Oh my God. Like, carbs aren't bad for you. You can have sugar. You can have caffeine. You can have all these things, but it's about the quantities of them. And then if you've got certain health considerations, whether, like if you have diabetes or you have cancer or you like some extremes. I have an autoimmune disorder called Graves' disease, which has some weird, funky things that happen with other areas of my body. So there are considerations in that, but that's why you work with a trained, licensed medical professional to address how you should eat, not just a trendy health influencer, blogger, health coach that never went to any sort of medically accredited school to figure that out. So it's like, but in terms of like, I'm Egyptian, Moroccan, and Danish.
Really?
Yes. And so if you look at where on my dad's side, he's Egyptian and Moroccan. Yeah. When I looked at where our ancestors had come from and what their diets were, goat's a major part of that. Like, I do fine on meat. I actually eat meat more than, it's kind of a food group, especially bacon, but I eat a lot of meat. I eat a lot of vegetables. I eat a lot of fruit. And then I do some, bread and stuff. I can't do dairy because I actually am intolerant. But I think you have to learn what your body needs in order to feed it correctly. And so that's my thing on health. And so to say, oh, meat's bad for you, you shouldn't eat it, it's going to make you, it contributes to cancer, it contributes to all these things. Show me reputable scientific studies that have been conducted to prove that conclusively. Usually, if you do research on studies, whether they're done by the Beef Council, no disrespect, or if they're done by an animal rights group, you can find the bias in how the study was conducted, who was interviewed, who did it. So in terms of being credible, you've got to be neutral. You have to be unbiased, and you have to really look at something to find a true answer, whether you like the results or not. So what I found is like I said, we've made food and health so overly complicated because people like me who are great marketers, well, we use that to make you buy crap. Right?
So when would you say it was the moment where you first would call yourself a farmer?
The day you learn to castrate a goat and it doesn't bother you. There's step one. Step two is the day when no one really likes when the butcher comes to put down the pigs, and you're like, I got this. Can I do it? That's number two.
Yep.
And three, when you can plant a 1/4 acre at using horse manure and chicken poop and goat poop that you've been composting for a year in a pile because no one was using this, and use it as and kind of like do your own soil amendments and get enough food to feed 5 people for a season to grow. I think I did okay.
Yeah.
Now there are certain things I killed, but other things I grew really well. So now I only like to grow certain things that I know I didn't kill the first 2 times.
So what do you grow now, and what is your current farming situation?
Okay, so current farming situation here at the ranch is again bringing back soil health. But what we will do next year is so we have fruit trees here. We have pears, Asian pears. We have 3 varietals of apples, and sadly, the cherry trees are going to have to come out because they're just beyond coming back. They're like oozing black goop that's probably contaminated with God only knows what.
Yeah.
So we will do fruit. I'm going to bring back the orchard and do fruit trees. Going to attempt to plant some figs that seem to do pretty well in Washington because I'm a California girl and I really need figs. And I don't have delusions of pomegranates or avocados given the fact that we don't have those tropical Mediterranean climates, but it's a dream.
Yeah.
So
maybe there's a way somehow.
Maybe, but definitely shishito, okra, long beans, peas. I'm going to try and do some new stuff too that I don't find as commonly grown up here. A lot of the farmers seem to stick to the same type of stuff. I think that gets really boring really quickly.
Yep.
So next year's garden will feature fun stuff and veggies to try, and then the trees I think are going to produce very nicely. Just given the amount of rain we had so late and the fact that they probably haven't been tended in about 8 years. They're not bad, it's just they need some help. So that is what I'm hoping to do here, along with the horses, and that's kind of it.
So what do you do with what you produce? Do you eat it all? How much of your own food are you able to eat?
So actually, here's my joke. Most people hoarded toilet paper and canned goods. I kind of hoarded livestock this year. I do work on meat production with a dear friend of mine down in Duval named Lulu Redder, and she runs Feral Woman Farms. So I'm doing pork and chicken. So all my friends are going to be the beneficiaries of beautiful amounts of meat in the next 3 weeks as we are putting them down because it's time to harvest. And then I'm just, again, it's going to be for friends and family. I am talking to a couple of the local CSAs that have developed in Seattle about doing like a season of production if we have enough, just to diversify what they have available to their clients. So it'll be a hybrid. It'd just be love of food for friends, but you might find it in a certain TBD CSA if it comes out well enough for a couple weeks is like kind of an exclusivity thing, and then that's a trial run to see if that's a viable thing to do. Well,
you'll have to let us know. Keep us posted so we can share that out on the Instagrams and whatnot.
Absolutely,
and let everybody know where to maybe try some of your food if they have the chance at some point.
Absolutely, yeah. There's some really cool local, a lot of the farms have CSAs, but there are two newer ones in the Seattle area that focus on city residents. One's called Local Yokel, and the other one's called Kin Food. And so I really like what they're doing. So something kind of like, very boutique and very niche is where I would start, because you and I both know how hard it is to produce at any scale, whether it's small, medium, or large. It's a labor of love. Like I said, right now we're taking horse poo-poo and chicken poo-poo, and we're making some healthier soil because there's, I need it's a slightly on the acidic side here, but nothing that we can't rebalance. It's not as bad as other things I've seen. So
what do you see as a key to soil health? What does that look like? What does that mean?
God, well, Washington, I'm on a learning curve. Everything's so luckily I always, I do my samples, I send them in, I kind of look at what's needed. Usually what I'm finding up here is it's always about nitrogen. There's always a nitrogen deficiency. There's also this strange phosphorus and zinc deficiency that I've found pretty consistently, but of course that's not hard to kind of cope with, but it just in general, because we're working with mostly clay. In California, we don't have loamy soil. Who does anymore? You got to make that stuff, or you put it in raised beds or whatever. But California I actually found it was harder because you had clay and sand. And you're like, what do you grow on this? Like some alfalfa, maybe?
Yeah.
Like it's just right. So,
totally.
So that's been my challenge, is just kind of like looking at what we have, and then like even with that's the beauty of having horses is that you're like, all right, I can use that. Boop, got some chickens. Oh, I can use that, and then I'm just going slow.
So that's how you correct basically the imbalances that you might find in nitrogen or phosphorus.
Yeah. Well, no, I have an organic fertilizer that I buy online. So no, I'll buy that. I just use a quality product that isn't. I just use something that's natural to amend that.
So
but I'm doing my best with what we have. With having 15 horses at this place, there's plenty of good poop, got some chickens. And so there are many, like I said, there's many ways to do stuff. I'm just trying to do it with what I have. and I'll take the time.
Well, and that's what everybody has to do. And that's what you talk about, growing up this farm from small, and you're adding more. That's what so many farm stories are, is just adding this, and then what could we do? And just using what you have available to then continue to build on that. And one of the things that you're mentioning here is animals, and that's what I've been hearing from a lot of other people as well.
Yeah.
They're part of this circle of soil health on one side, healthy food on the other, and animals are in that circle to help bring things that way.
Well, absolutely. It's even the way we do our hogs, right? The way, like, that's one of the things you saw, like, on my Instagram. I was photographing Lulu's the little homestead that's down in Duval, and this is some new level stuff. We technically are doing forest raised, pasture-centered pork. The newest, trendiest thing, all you Washington livestock producers that put your cattle, goats, or pigs in tree areas, they're forest raised now. That's like a new marketing.
So why is that supposed to be a good thing? I mean, you're a marketer. What's the...
Well, you know what? I found it very... I think it's because, again, it's just like, it's forest health. So as the animals as you have animals weaving in and out of natural environments, whether it's a pasture or it's in areas that has a heavy amount of trees, what they're doing, they're turning your topsoil, but they're fertilizing it when they poop. It's really, really natural. It's not real hard. And so what comes back after they eat out, all of our lovely, what do we have? Blackberries and what is that called? Bindweed. Yep. There's so much noxious stuff that they eat out and they take out, and what comes back is, better than what they took out. I mean, that's just kind of it. It's very cyclical. We don't have to make it too buzzy. But that's exactly what we're doing, and they get a large amount of space. They're rotated around, so they don't have they don't overgraze an area, and they just live very natural, normal, low stress lives before they become part of our own health system. And that's what I'm going to call it.
When you look at the whole system, we have like millions of people to feed just here in Washington. Is it possible to feed that many people that way, or how many people? I guess how sustainable is that?
Well, and again, I think this is where we have food bias. It's a really hard way of life, and to do it that way comes at a premium price. You can't make that meat $3 or $4 a pound, because it is, first you're looking at, quantity, you're then looking at quality, and then you're looking at a livable wage for the person doing it. It's why it costs more. So the answer is probably not, because we have so many people to feed, and unless there was a radical shift in the minds of large producers and government and so many other factors that I am not qualified to talk about, then the answer is no. If we incentivized smaller ranchers and producers more, maybe. Yeah. If larger food companies that own the larger operations would, forego a little bit of that profit margin so that we can increase quality of life of animals, living wage of farmers, then we can make steps towards it. But there's so much to make that answer a yes, and that, again, it comes down to people and their values. That the answer is no.
Well, I think it's great. Farmers make more money, and people don't like that because then it's profit motive, and people are just very suspect of that. But knowing farmers and getting to know even more of them through this podcast, I know that the way farmers think is if they have more money, they just plow it all back, no pun intended, plow it back into the farm. And that will make better food and healthier operations and more sustainable if farmers are able to make some money at what they're doing rather than just barely scraping by, which is what we're hearing from so many people.
That's what consumers don't understand, is what little margin or negative margin is in this business. That's why I said, the number one person that's my hero these days is any producer, no matter how they do it, because they work so hard for so little. It's really, that's why I say to my friends, I'm like, fine, you want better quality food, you want organic this, pony up part of your budget to pay for it and demand it from bigger companies so that, there's a way for you to have this at a price you're willing to pay. Because at the end of the day, it's your demands and then larger, the people that are, related to certain getting that to you, being willing to forego a little margin so that the person doing this for you, growing your food or raising meat, can bring this to your plate. Because it's just, you're not going to get pasture-fed, pasture-raised, grass-fed this for $2 a pound or $3 a pound. There's a reason it starts at 10. Yeah. Okay? Yeah. That's just it. So if you don't like that, then buy a quarter of an animal, buy half an animal, buy the whole hog.
Yeah.
Like I didn't finish my joke. Yeah, I hoarded livestock versus like basic stuff, so I have lots of pork. These, it's really worth just buying the whole animal and paying a farmer to raise it. That's an alternative to getting that higher quality at a lower cost.
And more people are doing that,
yes.
right?
Yeah, and that's the cool thing I've heard in this valley is most meat CSAs are sold out through April of next year.
Wow.
And most of the butchers have so much backlog that it's like months to get your animals
So we
slaughtered.
need more butchers to process this stuff. We need more farmers
to
producing
raise it.
this.
Yep.
And then I think we also need the structures for people to be able to connect with those kinds of things.
And I think that, it's really interesting even here in Washington, the amount of like food startups that have seemed to come in. So like I mentioned Local Yokel, I mentioned kin food, but then there's like Barn to Door, which is like an e-commerce platform for farmers. I think they're pretty solid. I still don't think that, if you want to start your own CSA and make your products available direct to customers in the area, you don't have to go overboard. You can start with like a Wix website, a Shopify site, a Squarespace site. Yeah. Those all don't cost very much. And then you want to make sure that you're searchable and you can be found. And I have lots of free articles on my website, which is maca.la, where I wrote about here are the e-commerce platforms you can use. Here's how you use Google to show up in local searches for food. Like it's not as hard. You need to put some time into it as most people think, because I'm going to tell you a lot of the most amazing producers I've met in this area, they don't even have a website.
Right. Because they love producing food and they're specialists in soil and animals and plants.
Yeah. So, but if you need revenue, I think the CSA model is going to evolve very rapidly over the next few years. I think people are already growing tired of it because not everybody wants a box of vegetables every week and the same vegetables every week. So again, something like the Local Yokel or the Kin Food, they're working on like diversifying that and not keeping it the same all the time. And, they're even talking to their partners about how they need more diversity, because if you want people to keep subscribing and to drive their revenue and to keep it growing, we've got to add food diversity in the box. So I've seen some really cool stuff happening in the Midwest with their CSAs where they brought in local, like pasta makers, and they're working with granaries to get heirloom beans, and they even do the salad dressing if it's a box of vegetables. So it's literally kind of like that, put the meal together. It's a more evolved model of the get the pre-made stuff to your house. And I like it. I like it a lot. So, and you've got the Farm Fresh to use and all the other kind of bigger ones. But I think that looking for local based groups that can bring food to the table within a certain mile radius is viable. It's always freshest. It's great. So if you're not one of the people that likes to deal with the public, check with some of your neighbors. Maybe they are. Maybe you can, again, put that combination together where you can do meat, eggs, and veg or fruit, and it's more of a package, and let them run it, and you do your brilliance, they do theirs, and it's good to test out new revenue models. I think that's the number one thing COVID has led us to understand is that we've got to diversify our revenue streams, because nothing is pandemic proof. Acts of God, First we had to deal with water problems, soil health problems, wildfires, and now we have to deal with, talk about resilience.
Crazy.
Yeah.
So let's go way back.
Okay.
Where did you grow up?
So I was born in Iowa, hence, understand the commercial side of beef and pork, because we had 1,200 acres of that, and
So you grew up on a farm?
I started off on a farm. I was born in Iowa. My grandparents, and it's still in our family, but 6 generations of 1,200 acres, Minnesota, cattle, pork, and then they did obviously soy and corn, and it's still done that way to today. That's just what it's always been. Mom moved us to the city when we were 8 because she just hated the farm life, and you know, that's kind of where I started. It's like I said, I started off on a farm, and I'm going to end up on a farm.
So that family farm, was that your mom's side or your dad's
My
side?
mom's side.
Okay.
Yeah, and it's been in the family since the early 1900s. Like they literally settled it and then have brought it through today, and now everyone's older and retired, so it's rented out to other producers and still maintained that way.
Even though she was the farm kid in the farm family, she was the one that was done with it and wanted to go to the city.
Exactly.
Interesting.
Yeah. So.
And then what did you do? You're in the city.
So
and you talked earlier about all these kinds of things.
I always rode horses, no matter where I was, and I was a barn kid. You know, my first job when I was 13 was on Arlington Racetrack, hot walking 2-year-old race horses because I was just yeah, I did. That was my first job. I'm like, I just want to do this. I had no fear of dying. I just, you know, that was my first job.
Even though you lived in the city.
Even though I lived in the city, I would always, you know, I'd take a train or a bus at least 45 minutes to get to more country areas where there were horses. Yeah. And then I went to college. And
so in the city was in L.A.?
No. I grew up in Chicago.
Oh, Chicago.
Yes, I was Midwest girl.
Where did I miss that? Sorry, now I'm caught up.
Okay, yeah. So Midwest girl.
Okay. So you moved to the big city of Chicago.
With my mother when we were 8, and was there till through college. And then when I was just after September 11th, I flew to Los Angeles, realized it was 60 in January, and left. I was like, I'm not doing these negative 12-degree winters anymore.
Yeah.
This is just, screw this. And when you're like 20, you know, you're like, oh, this is a great idea.
Yeah.
You're not afraid of anything yet.
What'd you go to college for?
I started with art, and then I majored in literature. I've always liked to learn. And then so everything that I do now is nothing related to what I studied, but I'm entirely self-taught because I love to learn.
And so you were still connected with farming as a kid, but you moved to LA. Then what were you doing? What did you jump into?
Oh my gosh, I worked in fashion. I worked in music and entertainment.
Okay, hold on. Fashion. What did you do in fashion?
Like, you're just going to really pull this out of me. I don't like to talk about myself. So
what did you do in fashion? No, I'm fascinated by this.
Oh my gosh. Okay, so
you don't normally talk to a farmer who has a background where they did stuff in fashion.
I know, right? Well, this goes to the whole part of your life that you live it the way people tell you, even though it really doesn't serve you. I guess so that was part of it. So in fashion, I was in-house at a brand to start, and then I started my own fashion blog. This was back in 2008 when blogging was becoming trendy.
Yep.
And within a couple years, I was ranked as one of the top fashion bloggers in the world. I could take pretty pictures of myself and put them on the internet, but I could write about the business side of fashion. Yeah. I've done some collaborations with brands like DKNY, Aldo. I've been to London and seen the Burberry fashion shows. I've been to a Marc Jacobs show. I did a lot, I was New York to LA, and I thought it was great. I got really bored with it because I learned something and I evolved very quickly. So after that, I went into doing some entertainment stuff, worked on some pretty notable movies.
Doing what with the movies?
I designed games that you played on social media to get excited about going to see the movies at the box office the day they open.
Yeah.
Because the only opening revenue that apparently matters is opening box office.
Yeah.
Which I never understood because there's so much money to be made in residuals. But anyway. Yes. Didn't quite make sense to me. So my job was to make you get excited to go see movies. Big movies. I did Snow White and the Huntsman.
So that was where it was already getting into marketing. Or marketing, I guess, in fashion really as well.
Yeah, it was influencer marketing. Yeah. And then I became the director of digital content at Power 106 in LA. So, worked, 4 a.m. studio sessions from everyone from, Mark Wahlberg down to Martin Lawrence to 50 Cent, The Game.
Wow.
Produced a lot of live concerts with Nicki Minaj and Iggy Azalea. And I burnt out of hip-hop in about 9 months because that's a crazy life.
Yeah, what's it like? I think people know it's crazy, but what does it actually look like?
Try to herd 5,000 goats and get them all to stay in one place at one time. I'll relate it back to farming now. Oh, man, crazy. It was crazy. And you're always going. There's always something to watch. And so I worked with so many talented people doing that, and I learned a lot. It was a constant evolution of things. But then that's when, again, it started to burn me out because I'm like, it's all very surface level. It's like appearance and money and cars and what do you have and what do you do? And I was like, that's where like I said, at about 33, I was like, I can't live like this anymore. This is just crazy. There was no depth. So, like I said, then I got into corporate marketing, did it very, very well. And I liked it because it was way more streamlined. There was always, It was about return and goals. Much more structured, learned a lot about data and analytics in that, because it was always like, well, how do we know what you're doing is working? And when you challenge me to that, I'll be like, I'm going to show you. So I learned analytics, and I learned ad management, and I learned very technical sides of a lot of things. And so that kind of killed the creative in me. And then I learned to kind of re-level and balance them out. So then it's like taking all the things that I've learned that I love, and I now, again, apply them to what we do in our business, which is great. And that's where I came out of. It's like I came out of a lot of big because that's what I was told I should do to be successful, and just realized I'm like, this really sucks.
So you said at one point, this was earlier, you said you stepped away from a big chunk of your business. What business was that at that time? Was it doing that corporate marketing stuff?
It was a lot of corporate marketing across a few different industries, and I'll be honest with you, I gave up $250,000. I know, it's like dream revenue for farmers. I said, I don't want this anymore. And I talked to the United staff of 6 at the time. They were so burnt out. We were all burnt out and so miserable. I'm like, I'm going to burn this down. They're like, please do. We'll go down to part-time. We'll do anything, but we're miserable. And one of like my best person that had worked with me for 4 years, and she was my best friend, she actually quit and stopped returning my calls because it had gotten so crazy with our clients. Wow. She's like, I love you, but I'm going to literally die doing this. So, because again, it was management of expectations. Like everybody wants and they need. And when you're being texted at like 8 a.m. on a Sunday to change a website banner and it doesn't stop, you're like, this is just insane. So
that's almost like farming, like when the cows get out at 4 a.m.
I'd rather deal with that. That's at least fun.
Well, sometimes
a headache, but more interesting. Get a little aggression out. It's like, get back in there. You can't do that to a client. So exactly. we burned down 60% of our business and basically started over.
What did that feel like? Was it scary?
It was more relief than anything else. I think I slept for about 4 days straight. and there was no relationships burned. It wasn't anything bad. It was just like, you know what? I understand what you need, but I can't provide this any longer. Here's a referral to someone who can. Do you need me to help you transition to them? It was so seamless and beautiful. Like I made sure, and most of them were very appreciative. One person was really angry, and they're like, we don't need you. And I'm like, okay, no problem. But we made sure that whatever was needed to let it go was done. And now I have, 2 of those people still work for me. The other ones have evolved into their own businesses. The other 2 decided that they just wanted to stay home with their kids and take care of them because that was where they went in life. And we do good work,
You said, you were saying things about like our business, and that's what I was going to ask you. Like, who is involved in the business beyond you?
Okay, so I have a wonderful assistant who works for me, and I call her Macala number 2 because she's got my brain, and she learns anything and everything as I teach it to her. She's very analytical. She is amazing, and just like met her she actually replaced someone that had worked for me for 4 years, then that was my, Kesha, who actually is part of another, who has influence on the new business for Grace Grit and Rich, which is the ranch, but she's doing more of her kid thing. So my new assistant is just amazing, and she's learning to kind of become me, and I think at some point she'll step into a bigger role. I have an amazing illustrator, artist, and graphic designer named Christina, who her family has raised quarter horses for forever. her. I have another writer named Melissa. She's kind of head of editorial. She runs 300 head of cattle out of Kansas. Everybody that works for me works on a ranch. Like, that's how great full circle it's come. So awesome. To say it's like, okay, I'm sorry, I'm going to be late on this because the cows did this. I'm like, oh, I still understand you. Okay.
Yeah.
And then the developer I work with, she's in Texas and they have everything. So her kids ride pro rodeo and she has cattle and goats and everything. So, as things evolved, I thought I just found it was very interesting alignment that everyone that now works in my company is related to agriculture in some sense. And it's worked out beautifully because we all understand the challenges of the off-farm and on-farm life.
Yeah.
So, and we have running jokes like, okay, what happened on your ranch this week? It's like, well, we lost a bunch of goats because of this thing. Like, it's, it's real life. So that's, your happiness isn't worth money. It's just not. And I think that's why a lot of people grow and produce because, there people are more profitable than others, right? Like but it's like, if you're happy doing what you do, then do it. Even if it's not as lucrative as it could be, if you're fulfilled, whatever that means to you, not what it means to other people. So, we do well now. It's not as big as it was, but we're not, and can we get bigger? Yes. But we're not driving it that way. We're letting it grow very naturally because every client that we have in like the food, we have a lot of wellness right now just because of all the focus on functional food. Food is medicine. That's what's driving a lot of what we're working with. And so we're just making sure that we're not producing like fad or trend stuff based on the new hype, but we're really aligning to what it really means. So we've got a lot of that happening right now, and it just comes very naturally. They're all very open and easy to work with, and they're collaborative. So as new comes in, we grow those relationships very slowly, very thoughtfully, and just love the work we do. And then it doesn't really feel like work, even though we're doing work. And it also leaves me time for, the girls and, feeding that farming side of myself. And I'm like, I'll never let that go because it's just become like self-care for me or whatever trendy term I can try and throw in there.
There's so much to this story of yours.
It's not very linear. It's very non-linear. It's very, very loopy, I know.
But that's what makes it great.
Okay.
You did mention earlier
Yeah.
that you were about getting to the truth about food and health and all of that.
Yes.
And you've mentioned, the myths out there.
Yes.
So what are the big lies that people are being told right now?
Oh, and I wrote about this. I wrote this really cool post that no one liked, and that one's got me death threats. I'll be fair. Oh yeah, because I wrote about six misconceptions you have about meat.
Why would people give you a death threat about an article like that?
Well, no one liked me writing about butchering or raising animals for food. And a lot of it comes off, not to bash a platform, but Medium is like ripe with very left-wing, animal rights activists those are the people that threaten me, the people that want the animals to live, in harmony with people. I'm like,
it just sounds so counterintuitive to then threaten people with death.
That's what surprised me. Like
you say a death threat. Like, what do they say? Obviously, the clean version.
It was. I've been told I should be slaughtered like my animals. I should be butchered slowly so I feel what they feel. The latest one recently was, I hope someone in your, hopefully maybe one day you'll have a relationship that's abusive and they'll whip you like you whip your horses.
That's disgusting.
Yeah, and those are the short versions. Usually they're very long and they make no sense. It's like all these ideas and weird things running together. You're just like,
you think maybe there's a mental health thing going on there?
I think so. But usually in the first couple I could handle, so I just stopped actively talking about, butchering as much, right? Like I didn't post like us breaking down animals or anything like that. And that's why I stuck to the horses and the gardening, and that seemed to go over a little bit better just because it's not worth it. But that is, so the myths, it's like, people as producers like, oh God, did you feed that pig or that cow corn and soy? Oh, it's so unhealthy. It could trigger our allergies because people are so allergic to corn and soy. So I dug into, I'm like, okay, we know that people can have reactions. Whether it's and there's differences between food sensitivities, food allergies, and food intolerances.
Yep.
broke that down recently too. So I looked into corn, both organic, GMO and non-GMO, and then I looked at soy as it relates to, can animals eat it? How does it interact in their diet? And then could it possibly trigger a reaction from someone who's sensitive to corn or soy as a human? Mm-hmm. This took a lot of research. It took me like 2 months to write this.
So is it possible?
Okay,
what did you find?
So first, they can eat, animals can eat corn and soy. You don't give raw soy to a pig because of digestion issues and a few other things. It's better articulated in my post.
Yeah.
But yes, they can eat it. And no, it does not cause a trigger of the reaction to people that have sensitivities in their diet. I found one study that possibly alludes to the fact that commercial chicken that had a high corn feed could possibly affect, like, if someone a human that eats it, if they have corn sensitivities, that chicken that was raised on corn feed might trigger something, but it wasn't even reputable. And I dug deep. It took so long. And then
there are so many of these things.
And just so you know, I had one of my professors read it to make sure that I had it right, because again, research person. And then I had two, you'd call them, regenerative ag beef producers read it too, just because this was new territory for me.
Right.
So it's like, that was a major thing. It's like everyone's like, oh, do you feed your animals soy and corn? And how do I know? You're like, to hear people at the farmer's market asking about the diets of the meat that they're buying from the local producer, yet they have no understanding of it, you're just like, could you actually read something that isn't based on a headline on some trendy-ass wellness blog? It's ridiculous. So I learned, and that was a big piece of it. And I had to break down organic. I had to break down pasture raised 100% grass fed versus something that might be grass and grain or grain only. I'm telling you, I love some beef that's had some grain. Do you know how much better it tastes? Its fat's better. So I like a combination. I like it to have space, but please feed it some grain. It tastes way better when you cook it.
Well, and I think that there's a misconception, grass fed versus grain finished. Grain finished beef is never raised start to finish on grain.
Yeah.
Still, like, what, 80, 90% of its diet over its life is still grass.
Yes. And so it's like all these little nuances are, only 100% grass fed and pasture raised is even healthy meat. It's like, no, those aren't even factors to consider. That's someone marketing that to you to make you pay for X. And that was like, I think, number 2. But there was a lot of things in there where I'm just, to take the time to take apart a lot of the consumer misconceptions and then to be met with people who threaten you and or tell you that, you're wrong. And I'm like, well, I use science research to write this. This isn't just an opinion. This is the closest to breaking down this as I could find. I may not be right. I'm not saying I am. But when I do the research, I'm like, is this bad for animals? Since I raise animals, I want to know what they should eat. Especially even my horses. I research everything that's in the grains that I feed them and the supplements, and I trace them back to who makes them and where the ingredients are. And you know what I end up telling people at the end of the day? I'm like, if your food says USA on it at the grocery store, just buy it. Because let's not go too much on a tangent about like food standards and safety standards of things made from outside the U.S. But I'm going to tell you, if I have to eat a conventional avocado from California versus something that's been imported, I'm going to eat my U.S. made food. And not to knock other countries, but again, as you read and learn, you're like, ooh, I don't know about that. Like, even if you read like a book, like, what is it? Miriam Nestle, like her book, like she talks a lot about how she tested food from other countries and things from overseas and what she found and everything else.
Yeah, we'd be naive to think that things work the same way across on the other side of the world in a different culture, different government, totally different part of the world.
Different food standards. So that's why, at the end, I'm just like, I like to see people eat real food. It's why I recently wrote about, even the supplement industry. I'm like, we need supplements to a degree, but now that that's the latest thing with the supplement companies to sell you more expensive vitamins that don't need to cost that much is they tout soil degradation and quality of product. I'm like, oh, and I'm like, it's just a marketing ploy. Like, Number one, don't eat crap. Shop the perimeter. Food isn't as complicated as we've made it. Do you need to take supplements like in Washington? We need vitamin D? Yeah, because we don't have sun 8 months a year. But do we have to take this $100 to $150 a month in pills and liquids? No, that's unrealistic.
Yeah.
Put the $100 into produce. Eat a salad. Eat some fruit. Poop more. It's just like the horse. You put the grass hay in. You put a little psyllium in there, and the poop comes out.
And it's called life.
Fiber.
It's called life and nature, and that's how it works, and it's healthy. And that's where we should be getting our vitamins and minerals from, is a well-rounded diet.
As much as you can, and if you're not, that was the other thing I said, I'm like, look, get proper testing to see if you have food allergies or sensitivities or intolerances. But if you're not allergic to milk, to me, milk is better than the highly processed alt milks on the market. If I could do dairy, I would. And I just wouldn't do loads of it, right? And I balance out my meat. I do chicken. I do, I don't eat a lot of fish because it's just not my thing, but I do red and white, and I do the best quality I can from what's available to me. And then I just make sure I balance out everything else I need. And I don't take a lot of supplements because I don't need them. I feel great, and I'm active, and pretty much once I came to that and stopped being so bent on it, everything leveled out. I do well, haven't been sick, and that's just kind of it. So, like I said, it's when you break down a lot of these hypey things, they don't like it because it's not their truth that they've chosen to believe in. No, I need all my vitamins and supplements. I'm like, okay, if you want to be a health food junkie, there's a disorder for that. That's actually a disorder now. So if you want to exercise a lot, great, go for it. But, you don't have to overdo it. I used to work out 3 hours a day, and now I'm like, I clean our barn 3 times a week, and that's enough for me. That's my strength training. Yeah. Working with a horse, there's my flexibility and mobility, because Victoria is teaching me to dance with my babies. I'm not very coordinated. I look like a freak, but I'll get there. So, I think that's a lot of what it's about. So dispelling the myths, you have people tell you you're wrong, or they risk violence on you. And for COVID, I broke down crying one day because it was when the horse emails came in, because I'm like, I love them so much. I'm like, really? This is what because it was the first time I wrote about Katie, and when we got her, and she's just a train wreck, getting better by the day, but she's been really badly abused. And to kind of just see how deep it goes in her, because she's really expressive. I wrote about it, and it was hard for me to write because it just, to see them, and then someone tells you that they wish you're hurt the way you hurt the horse. So
those were the emails that you got that people were saying.
When I talked about I rescued an animal,
you're talking how you're helping an animal, and they were.
I hope you get into a relationship where you're whipped like you whip her. Whatever the weird thing was, I can't quite articulate it because I've already deleted. You're just like, what the?
Yeah.
Exactly. That's so it's and so I'm just like, you know what, and you block those, you delete them, but I'm just like, I can't, I'm gonna ignore it. But you're like, why would you wish someone harm that's trying to do better by the way that the food that we eat, that we need to stay alive, is produced?
Yeah.
Go attack.
And it's crazy. You're not the first person that I've talked to on this podcast who has gotten death threats simply for talking about food and farming online. It's crazy.
And being factual about it in a sense versus aligning to whatever trend everybody's on. Right. And by the way, they're not even the majority. I looked into, I'm like, what percentage of the world is vegan? I'm like, it's much lower. I think the most current statistic, and it's a few years old, that I could find was 16% of the global population are vegan and vegetarian. I thought it'd be much more, but it's global. And it was a few years old, but I'm like, okay, that's not as big as I thought. That tells me people eat meat, people eat dairy. Yeah. So while there's a loud voice, that's not the majority. So again, I think it's just about doing your own level of investigation and finding what's meaningful to you, but also accepting the fact that what someone else's choices are for food, if they don't align to yours, you cannot attack them for that. In fact, maybe it would be better to have a dialogue with them about why they eat the way they eat, compare what you do, and you might find some new common ground. Because I'll tell you, like, I think it's become like, with all the political stuff that's happened, like, I'm mixed race. I'm a single woman in ag. But you know who's helped me? Mostly white farmers. And most of them voted for Trump. I'm going to be honest about it. Like, and I'm like, but that's because if this wasn't about political views. This was, you know what? I was willing to work and they were willing to teach. And I was open to changing my mind. So I've never felt discriminated against by someone in a more rural, predominantly white area. They're the ones that taught me. They're the ones that helped me. So that might not be what somebody wants to hear on your podcast, but it's the truth. And to be honest, if I needed someplace to go live tomorrow, those are the people that have open doors ready for me. Like, just to be honest, it's like, oh, you always have a home in Texas. You can come back to California out here.
Yeah.
That's
awesome.
You know what? They might be more conservative. They might be Christian. They might have voted for Trump. But you know what? Those are the people that I call family. They never discriminated against me because of race or anything else. Like, they were happy I wanted to learn because a lot of people don't want to do the work.
Yeah.
And of course, like, I don't ever want to do it at that scale because, again, it's a lot of work and I was burning out. But at least I learned. Again, like I said, fall down a hole and you're like, oh, I don't know how I got here, but this is cool. But I have a lot, again, that's why I say I respect anyone who does anything for food because it is hard-ass life.
Where can people follow what you're doing?
Well, I have, the ranch is going to be at gracegritandwit.com, and it's an evolutionary thing that's growing. It's going to be like part coaching business / things that we're still developing based on how we do. So it changes every week. We're almost there.
Just like farming.
Yeah, exactly. We're getting there. So we've got like horse programs and then with just my marketing work and a lot of the research that I do. So if you want the brainy articles about, well, sorry guys, this isn't true, or how to better market your business and tools, I love to write about that stuff. That's the academic in me. So it's maca.la.
Okay.
So that's what I do.
That's easy to remember.
Yeah, I know, right?
LA.
I know, it's all trendy.
And then the other one is gracegritandwit.com.
And then Instagram, I'm Macala, so Macala.
That's, how did you get that handle?
Remember, I started the internet, homie. I was like one of the first 100 people on Twitter, which I deleted because I hate Twitter now.
Well, thank you so much for sharing all of this backstory, which just brings so much more to the already cool stuff that you're doing.
Yeah, there's a lot of people like me kind of moving into the space as others move out because we're like, we can't live like this anymore. We want to do something different. So my best takeaway is like support local food producers. If you are someone who buys food, or you know what, try growing some of it yourself. There's classes. So many more and more of the younger producers are offering classes, whether it's butchering or home raising chickens in your backyard or how to grow a small garden. There's a lot you can do. So play with it, but try and understand someone's way of doing something before you judge them and condemn them.
Thank you for having me out here to the farm. Thank
you for coming. It's been a while. And Bridget, if you're listening, I love you. You inspired me to do this.